Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the psychology of learning. Obviously, this set of webinars that Pearson is delivering is all connected with confidence, building confidence in teachers, building confidence in learners. And so today we're going to be looking at building confidence in our learners, and I am going to talk to you a little bit about the research and the theory behind that. But I also want to talk to you about a project that I've been involved in for about 7 or 8 years now, and give you some tools, resources, and ideas that would enable you to also go away in your classrooms and start trying implementing. So without further ado, well, this is me, Mike Mayer. I am, as you can see, Senior Director for Learning Research and Design at Pearson, and I specialize in English language learning. I've been with Pearson for almost 20 years. And before that, what feels like 100 years ago, I did used to be a teacher. So my studies were French. I was a teacher of English in France. And then I moved on to dictionaries. I was a lexicographer and a dictionary publisher for many years. And then I moved over to this learning research and design team. And so what are we doing in learning research and design? Well, basically, we're looking at all the studies in applied linguistics and trying to extract from all of these studies what good learning, teaching, and assessment looks like. There's a lot of research out there. There are a lot of theories out there. What we try to do is look at the evidence and the data, then take that and obviously use that to build it into our courseware, into our assessments, so that we are confident that we are creating effective products. But then once those products are launched in the market, we also want to see, okay, this is based on data, evidence, best practice. Are these products working? So another key function for the part of the business that I sit in is measuring the impact of these courses and these assessments to make sure that they are having the desired effects and that people are indeed learning with them. So that's kind of my role now at Pearson. And today, as I say, we're going to look at confidence and what does confidence mean and how can we try to make our learners endless definitions of what confidence means. We're just sharing one of those with you on the screen. They're a combination of hope, optimism, and resilience. A belief that you can be successful and reach your goal. And throughout this presentation today, you're going to see me focusing on resilience, the importance of resilience and building resilience in our learners, and goals. Setting goals, measuring progress against goals, reaching goals. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. Now, here we go. We've had hello from everybody, I think. Next thing in the chat, why are your learners studying English? We know there are lots of different reasons why people study English, but why are your learners studying English? Could you pop your answers into the chat? Okay, I can see for work, expand their horizons, career advancement. They're learning it for school, professional goals. Okay, a lot of them for professional goals, a year abroad, study abroad. Okay, my skimming reading skills are pushed to the limit there. Thank you for participating. Every year at Pearson, we carry out a survey with our learners, and we want to find out, why they're learning, what they're learning, how are they learning, not just for English, but for all subjects. And we know that people are studying for a variety of reasons. And you can see some of them on the screen there, and some of those are indeed the answers and the suggestions you popped into the chat. So getting a goal, passing exams, securing a visa because they want to go and live and work abroad, traveling the world, a place at university. They want to go and study in an English-speaking country maybe, or they need a particular grade in English to be able to access a university place in their own country, and promotions at work. So yeah, there's a couple in there around making friends, traveling. People do learn languages as a hobby. Equally, though, I think you can see that a lot of these reasons are actually quite big life goals. They are quite high stakes. Increasingly, English, particularly for employability reasons, is becoming essential to get that job. And so with these big life goals, these are high stakes. There's a bit of pressure associated with that. And when there's a bit of pressure and when things are high stakes, then emotions can also run high. So here we go, back on chat again. What emotions do you experience when learning something new? Might be a language, it might be a new sport, it might be any other skill. What kind of emotions do you experience? Okay, nice that the first couple were actually positive, excitement, but I'm also seeing a lot of anxiety, frustration, embarrassment. I like that one. Embarrassment, anxiety, satisfaction, happiness. Yeah, when you succeed, there is a sense of happiness and achievement. Thank you once again for participating. I'm asking about emotions because emotions, when we think about the psychology of learning, emotions do play a critical part in learning. And there are very strong correlations between positive emotions and success. So again, on the screen there, you can see a couple of quotes from researchers around how emotions shape an individual's mindset, how they approach learning, how it drives motivation, how they develop strategies for learning. Okay, and again, just picking out some keywords here as to the things that I'm going to be focusing on in this presentation. That mindset, how do we really develop a positive mindset in our learners? Motivation, key to learning. Engagement, enjoyment, fun, and of course, performance. So keep your ears open for some of those references coming up in this presentation. We carried out a piece of research on social media with language learners, and here were some of the answers that we got. So, and I think you probably covered all of those in your answers in chat. Frustration, anxiety, embarrassment. Now that's the one that I relate to because, as I mentioned, my studies were French. I went to an all-boys school in the north of England where speaking French in front of other 13, 14-year-olds was one of the most embarrassing things we had to do, because German wasn't quite so embarrassing because it sounded quite masculine, but French just sounded very feminine, and you know what boys can be like. So it was incredibly embarrassing. Pressured, you feel foolish, you feel that misinterpreted, you can't get your ideas across, people just don't understand you. So I think we have to acknowledge that negative emotions are to be expected. We can't eradicate them, and to a certain extent, a little bit of anxiety can be a good thing. What is dangerous and what does really impact learning is if we let these negative emotions go unchecked. So if they just build week after week after week, eventually we stop learning. We get learners who disengage, they're not following, they've decided this isn't for me, and they move on. So we really want to be focusing on how do we minimize these negative emotions. So another quick definition of what we're looking at here, that belief in your ability to complete a task or goal successfully. And that, as I said, believing that you can do it actually correlates very strongly with being able to do it. So to put it simply, if I think I can do it, I have a better chance of actually being able to do it than if I go into it thinking, I can't do this. I'm no good at this. I won't be able to do it. If I convince myself I won't be able to do it, that is probably going to have a negative impact and what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. You won't be able to do it. Okay, so at Pearson, what we're trying to do is develop these learning experiences that build confidence and help learners achieve goals. And so I mentioned that I've been working on a project at Pearson for about 7 or 8 years now. And that project is something called the Global Scale of English. And if we think about motivating, if we think about goal setting, if we think about giving learners a tangible evidence of success, these were all things that lay behind the creation of the Global Scale of English. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what we've developed, because the Global Scale of English resources are the ones that I'm going to be sharing with you and that can help support the building of confidence in our learners. So you can see a very quick overview there about the Global Scale of English. It's an extension of the Common European Framework. It's a proficiency scale that measures language proficiency on a scale from 10 to 90 for the what we call the functional skills, so speaking, task, listening, reading, and writing. And we like to think it's the first of its time in that it's truly global. It's not just a European framework. It was created using teachers around the world, a truly global framework. I'm guessing that a large percentage of you are quite familiar with the Common European Framework. And so let's build on what you already know. So the Common European Framework, as you know, is again focused on functional language. So what learners can do in a language, not just English for the Common European Framework, it's all European languages, Spanish, German, Italian, French, but things that you can do: give instructions, follow a lecture, order food in a restaurant. Okay. It has been highly influential in language teaching and assessment around the world, and in English language teaching and assessment around the world. And as is the case for anything which is successful, people then start to find issues. Oh, and it doesn't do this. Oh, and I can't use it for this. Oh, and it's not relevant for my learners. Oh, and this and this and this and this. So, and we also, as a publisher, we found some limitations with the Common European Framework that we were using. And you can see some of those limitations on the screen at the moment. So Common European Framework is really focused on general English. So there are domains for work and there are domains for study, but they're really small. And so as a publisher, if we try to create a business English course or an academic English course, there's really not enough information in there to build out a full course. So that was a limitation for us, and we were hearing that from our our teachers and our partners as well. A common European framework was developed for adults and young adults, so kind of 15 years and older. So think upper secondary and university and adults in private language schools. It was never created for primary and lower secondary, even though many people have tried to use it for primary and lower secondary. And quite often when I present on this topic at conferences, teachers are a bit surprised that it wasn't developed or appropriate for young learners, primary and lower secondary. And I think they can be excused for having that idea, because all publishers, Pearson included, have common European framework levels on their course materials for primary and lower secondary. It's really become shorthand for beginner, pre-intermediate, intermediate, advanced. So actually that common European framework level, particularly on primary and lower secondary, doesn't really mean that much, if I'm honest. Around 2/3 of the information is about speaking. And, you know, that's understandable. All the research was carried out during the heyday of the communicative approach to language teaching, where it was all about speaking, you know, forget grammar, forget writing. We all just want to speak. Fine. And to a certain extent, that is true today. People want to be able to communicate orally in English. But as a publisher, and I'm sure as teachers, we cover 4 skills. And so we needed more information for reading, listening, and writing, and that wasn't available in the Common European Framework. If you think about the Common European Framework, you're going to be thinking about the 6 levels, A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. And if you think about those 6 levels, some of those levels, and we're going to come on to this in a little while, some of those levels take a long time to move between. And if you only have those levels of proficiency, it's really difficult to show learners that they're making progress. And if you can't show a learner they're making progress, then ask yourself, what does that do to a learner's confidence? If every year I test them and they're A2, they're A2, they're A2, they're A2, they're A2, they're A2, they're going to lose confidence because it feels like I'm not making any progress. Why am I doing this? And finally, it was difficult for teachers, it was difficult for our authors, it was difficult for our editors to use on a daily basis, because I don't know if you've studied the Blue Book, but it is quite academic. The information is spread out all over the place. And so we wanted to create some tools and resources that made life easier for our editors and made life easier for teachers. And so we set about creating new learning objectives from a range of different sources. And we roughly followed the same methodology used by the Common European Framework, which is effectively sending out these new learning objectives to teachers and asking teachers to rate them, to say at what level would your student be able to master this particular language function. And all teachers think this is very subjective and they feel quite insecure about how they're rating. But when you collect together enough data, so we've had data from thousands of teachers around the world, where that data is similar, then that subjective data becomes objective, because the teacher in Poland, in Japan, in Brazil, in Canada, they're all agreeing that it's about around this level of proficiency required for this particular language function. So where we have 80% agreement, we keep the learning objective in the database. And where we don't, it's rejected because it's been confusing. If one teacher thinks it's A2, one teacher thinks it's B2. There's something probably confusing about the wording. So it's rejected. So all the data that you will find for the global scale of English has been validated by teachers around the world. So you can be confident that this is a global view of proficiency. And as a result of that research, we've developed 4 sets of learning objectives. So a set for young learners, so primary and lower secondary, a set for academic learners studying for English for academic purposes, a set for professional learners, so English for the workplace, and then we've developed more learning objectives for general adult learners, so building up the reading, the listening, and the writing. And those PDFs, all free to download from the website. So if you just put Global Scale of English into your search engine, you will find these PDFs to download. And quite simply, they are lists of language functions, of learning objectives, grouped by skill, speaking, listening, reading, writing, by Common European Framework level, including the plus level, so A1, A2, A2 plus, B1, B1 plus, B2, B2 plus, C1, C2, and then within the Common European Framework level, broken down into GSE leveling. So you can see what's at the bottom of B1 and what's at the top of B1. Okay. Now, did I just say 4 sets of learning objectives? So when I created this presentation a couple of weeks ago, we had 4 sets of learning objectives. But this week, it's been very exciting because we have just released a 5th set. In fact, Wednesday, you can see I even put the date on. On Wednesday, we published a set of learning objectives for pre-primary, so the very youngest learners aged 3 to 5. So if you're teaching at that level, don't think that you don't need learning objectives and that they're not useful. We now have a set for pre-primary. We don't yet have the PDF like the others that you can see, but we do have them in the Global Scale of English Teacher Toolkit. Now, Mike, I hear you say, what is the Global Scale of English Teacher Toolkit? Well, it's this, and you can see the link on the screen there. So if you go to pearsonenglish.com/GSE, you will find a link to the Teacher Toolkit. And this is a database that contains all of the GSE learning objectives. So now those 5 sets that we have of learning objectives. And in addition to that, we have grammar aligned to Global Scale of English. We have vocabulary aligned to Global Scale of English. So a database for adult learners and a database for young learners. And then we have another piece of functionality called a text analyzer. So if you are one of those keen teachers that likes to bring in additional texts to the classroom, maybe it's something that's topical or your students are particularly interested in a particular topic, you find a text on the internet, you can paste it into this text analyzer, and it will give you an approximate level for the readability of that text so that you can just be sure that it's appropriate and at an appropriate level for your learners. So all I'm going to say about the Teacher Toolkit, you can find other explanations on the internet, on YouTube. You'll probably see my face smiling out at you from other YouTube videos explaining more about the Teacher Toolkit. So if you're interested, I suggest you go and search on there. And so the GSE, how does this help? The Teacher Toolkit is intended for teachers, but through you teachers, we want to be able to help learners as well. So It will help learners understand what they need to do what they need to master to be at the level that they want to be. They can see where they are. They can see the little granular details of language functions they need to acquire before they can say they are B1 or B2. And as I'll show you, it helps to keep them motivated because they can see themselves making progress. As a teacher, maybe you're using learning objectives created by your institution, or you're finding them in the course book. You can be assured that the global scale of English learning objectives have been rated against an international standard. So it's not unique to your country, the level, it's a global standard. And as we're in a globalized economy, knowing what the leveling is globally is kind of quite important these days. And you've got access to the frameworks of learning objectives, 5 frameworks, and you can identify appropriate skills to teach, areas of potential challenge, and again, enabling you to monitor the progress of your students. Again, I know a lot of teachers are using published materials, but if you want to supplement with additional language functions, or there are language functions that your particular group of students need that you're not finding in the course materials, the teacher toolkit would be the place to go. And at Pearson, the global scale of English now underpins everything that we do in courseware and assessment. And we have this connected English language learning program, which is really the optimal teaching, learning, teaching, and assessment cycle. So you can start off by placing your students at an appropriate level, key to all good learning, getting them in at the right level. So that can give you a GSE level of proficiency. We then plan using the learning objectives, and those are used to create the courseware that you can see there. We then use those same learning objectives to inform our assessments, and we have a range of assessments. So the Versant benchmark assessments are assessments that will help you to monitor the progress of learners. We're going to come on to that, the importance of demonstrating progress to your learners in order to motivate, in order to build confidence. So you can monitor the progress. You'll get some rich score reports, which will show strengths and areas for improvement, some tips on how to improve, and some links back to the courseware if you're using Pearson courseware, where you'll find activities that can help to remediate some of those weaker areas. Keep going around this circle until your learner feels ready, and you feel ready that your learners can then take a certificate. So that by certification, we really mean that important piece of paper that will certify officially their level in English for an employer, for a university, for a government, for migration purposes. So all of this at Pearson is underpinned by the global scale of English, which, don't forget, is heavily linked to the Common European Framework. So on the score reports, for example, it will give you a global scale of English score, but it will also give you the Common European Framework score. So enough of the blah, blah, blah about the theory. How do we go about building learner confidence with the global scale of English? So I really want to look at 4 areas. So understanding the right level of challenge, goal setting, the importance of allowing learners to experience success, and then building something that we call a growth mindset. Okay, so let's start. A very good place to start would be number 1. So understanding the right level of challenge, as I said, placing a student at the beginning of their course is kind of critical. You don't want them to be placed in too low a stream. They're going to get bored. You don't want them to be placed into higher stream because they're just not going to follow and they're going to just disengage. So good placement is really key to the beginning of good learning. So once we know where we're starting, so we have our starting spot here, and we know that by the end of the course, we want to get them to like a mid A2, so 35 to, let me move this out of the way, for 35 to 37 on the global scale of English. And so we want to be pitching our teaching around this 30 to 38 area. This is what's known as the zone of proximal development. So if you want to impress your friends at dinner parties, you can drop in the zone of proximal development. You might know it if you've studied applied linguistics I+1. And it's this idea that, notice our learner was at 20, what were they at? 28, okay? But I'm saying that the zone of proximal development is 30. So we're not teaching them at 28. If we teach them at 26, 27, 28, they're probably going to feel quite good because they can do the things at that level. And it's going to feel easy, and, you know, maybe they will become overconfident, but they're not going to make progress. In order to make progress, you need to constantly be challenging learners, but challenging them at an appropriate level. And it's that level that is known as the optimal learning zone, or the zone of proximal development. So it's the things that they can do with support from a teacher, with scaffolded activities. They start there until they can then do it independently. And so they will then, so they'll be challenged, and then they'll practice, and you'll be scaffolded, and then they'll kind of being able to do it independently. And then you want to move on. You want to push them to the next level. So it's about constantly pushing them. We're not doing things at 50 or 60 on the GSE. They will just, that's too difficult. They will just disengage. So finding that appropriate level of challenge is key to them feeling that, yeah, I can do this with the support. So once we've got them into this zone of proximal development, this, the quote there that you can see on the screen is from another researcher who calls this optimal state the flow. Your learners get into the flow where they are being challenged, they struggle a bit, they're scaffolded, then they master it, and then they can do it, and then they move on to the next thing, and we go round in that sort of cycle. Okay, so we want to understand where they are on their journey. We want to teach them where possible in a personalized way. So things that, you know, not everybody will be advancing at the same level. I know we all have mixed ability classes, and that's the subject of a completely different webinar, but where possible, personalizing the feedback to that individual learner. And then checking, ongoing assessment that you will be doing as teachers informally in the classroom. You can see if the students understood something and if they haven't, and then letting them know that they have mastered something. So if we have our zone of proximal development, off to the teacher toolkit. I've selected the type of learners I have. Here it's general adult. I've got my zone of proximal development, and it's going to give me a list of learning objectives which are appropriate at that level for each of the skills: speaking, listening, reading, writing. Now, you will see there are 226 learning objectives there. I am not suggesting that on your course you will be teaching all 226, and not all 226 will be meeting the ultimate goals of your learners. Okay, this is the complete set of learning objectives, but every set of learners will have a slightly different focus. So it would be for you as the teacher or the lesson planner or the curriculum developer to really select the learning objectives which are appropriate for your group of learners. Goal setting. Okay, so we hopefully have got some course goals. Okay, we know that by the end of this academic year, I want my students to be able to give a simple presentation on a topic of their choice. I want them to be able to write a simple academic essay, and I want them to be able to understand a simple academic report. Okay, these are the course goals. They're quite broad. They're not as big as the I want to learn English goal, but they're still quite broad. And so if we look at the middle one, I want my learners to be able to write an academic essay. What you will get from the global scale of English are these more granular, more detailed steps to be able to writing that essay. Because before you can write an essay, you have to be able to write a topic sentence, you have to be able to write an introduction, you have to be able to write a concluding paragraph. You're not going to just give the students a subject and say, okay, go away, write an essay. No, they're outside of the zone of proximal development there. They're just going to drown. So by having these more granular steps, you're also in a position to give the students credit for being able to do each of these steps. You don't have to wait until they can write a full essay before you can say, oh, well done, you can write a full essay. No, you want to be able to say, that's great. You can actually write an introduction and notice given a model, because that's the first step. Given a model, and what you'll see in the global scale of English that you won't see in the Common European Framework is this scaffolding built into the learning objectives. So again, that means I can give credit. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the GSE level is for this, but let's say this is GSE 43. You can write an introduction given a model. And then when they can do it without a model, they're at GSE 49 or GSE 50. So it's a higher level, but it means that on the journey to being able to do it independently, you are able to give them credit, and giving them credit is important. And goal setting is important. And I'm sure you all set goals. Just in case you don't, sharing the goals with students has been shown in the research to have an impact on what they learn. So if they know what the key focus is for a lesson, this piece of research showed they had a much better chance of actually mastering that particular learning objective when they know what the key goal is. So if you're not already sharing learning objectives with your students and the goals of the lessons with your students, it's worth thinking about doing. Increasingly in course books, you will see them in the opening of units, of course. And being able to give this credit along the journey really feeds into allowing students to experience success. This, again, all the research shows that one of the things that builds confidence is having a taste of what success feels like. And, thinking back to my own education, secondary education, again, 100 years ago, it often felt that the teacher was almost trying to catch you out to prove that they knew and you didn't. And so you had to know your place. And so very often, the beginning of the year, you were failing because they needed you to be humble. Okay. Hopefully this situation's changed. I haven't been in a British school for quite some time, but there was that power dynamic, and that is really detrimental to learning. What we need to do is, particularly early on, allow the learner to experience success, even if you're not challenging them a lot at the beginning. Let them feel secure, let them feel confident, let them know I can do this before challenging them, because when you challenge them, there will be some failure, and hey, don't know who said it, but the best learning is through making mistakes. You don't make mistakes means you're not doing anything. So they will start making mistakes, but give them a chance to experience success early on. So I've been monitoring chat, but I can see there's been a lot of activity, but we're back into chat for this question. 3 students have taken my placement test. My placement test is on the Common European Framework. I have got student 1 who's A2, student 2 who's A2, and student 3 is B1. Which 2 students are the closest in proficiency level? And you can pop your answers in. Is it student 1 and student 2, student 2 and student 3, student 1 and student 3? There's hesitation, and I suspect there's hesitation because it's a trick question. It is a little bit. If I ask you the same question and show you this, you're going to know immediately it's 2 and 3. 2 and 3, because even though student 1 is A2 and student 2 is A2, A2 covers quite a range of proficiency. And so you can't really tell. Just if I just say A2, you don't know, is it the bottom of A2? Is it the top of A2? Student 3 is at the bottom of B1. So actually, student 2 is very close in proficiency level to student 3. It's just, if I'm just using those 6 levels, A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, I have no way of knowing. And again, with the global scale of English, what we wanted to be able to do was show teachers, but show learners where they are within a Common European Framework level. Okay, this is less of a trick question, but I'm thinking you're going to have to guess because you won't know the answer. Doesn't matter, there's no prizes. So I have got a learner, and this learner's first language is quite similar to English. Okay, so think of another European language, not an Asian or an Arabic language. They are more challenging. This learner is motivated. Motivation is a key predictor of success. This learner studies English for a couple of hours every day. So it's not a couple of hours per week. There's not as much time to forget between lessons and have to recap again and again. So this is regular studying of English. How long will it take this learner to move from B1, bottom of B1, to the bottom of B2? And you can pop, is it 100, 200, 300, 400, 500? A, B, C, D, E. I'm seeing a B, an A, an E, an A. Okay, a D. Okay, quite a lot of people saying A and B. So if you look at this chart, it's actually the figure, the number on the left-hand side. So around 400 hours to move from B1 to B2, which is, if you think about that in academic years, that's quite a lot. Look at the other figure, 1100 hours. This is the other extreme where the learner has a very different first language, so possibly an Asian language or an Arabic language with a different script. This learner is not motivated. That has a big impact. And this learner is only doing 1 or 2 hours, a week. So there's a lot of chance to forget between lessons. So even for our super motivated learner, 400 hours, it's more than 1 academic year. Every time I test that learner, they're B1, they're B1, they're B1, they're B1, they're B1, they're B1. So having the more granular scale, what we want to be able to do is make it easier to demonstrate to these learners that they are making progress. So every, 70 hours, we can do a little test and show that they've made 3 points progress on average. All of this is based on research. You can go to the Global Scale of English website. I didn't just make up these numbers before this presentation. There's a whole paper on it if you're interested. But it is, in general, the higher you are in proficiency, the longer it takes to move to the next level. Kind of doubles every level in the number of hours. And that, if you can't show progress, if you can't demonstrate progress, that is demotivating. That would lead to like draining of confidence for our learners. And really all of this comes together in creating what is known as a growth mindset. Now, I'm sure all of us have heard somebody at some point say, I'm just no good at English. Maybe we've even said it ourselves, maybe not about English because we're English teachers, but maybe I can certainly hear myself saying, I'm just no good at science, right? And probably because you've had a bad experience, you've tried and you've failed and you've had a bad experience and you have what is known as a fixed mindset. And that fixed mindset means basically you're born with an ability to do science, or you're born with an ability to do languages. And if you don't have that ability, you can't change it. It's a bit like having blue eyes or blonde hair. I guess you could dye the hair, but you're just born with it. You can't change it. That's a fixed mindset. We do not want our learners to be in that fixed mindset. We want them to be in the growth mindset, which is the belief that, okay, this isn't going to be always going to be easy, but I know that if I make an effort, I can do this. I can master sciences. I can master the language. Okay. Well, you might say, well, that's easier said than done. I love the theory. What can we do? So there are various kind of techniques that we can use. And I've listed some of them on the screen here. So reflection, again, increasingly we are building this into the courses that we build, because there's a lot of evidence to show that if you get learners to reflect on their learning, not only does it make that learning kind of stick better, it enables you to have a conversation about, do you feel confident with this? Do you feel you've mastered this? And to be able to show them, 3 weeks ago, you couldn't do this, and now you can do this. Giving them tangible evidence that they are making progress, and that progress is down to their effort, not just to luck. Okay? And as I said before, if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. So I know in teacher training now, it must be just, part and parcel of the training, but we have to model a positive attitude to mistakes. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. Just have to make sure we have a positive attitude so that we're not discouraging learners when they make those mistakes. Allow learners to experience success, and particularly early on. So again, by providing these smart goals that you can measure against, even with the scaffolding, given a model, if the speaker speaks slowly and clearly, all that scaffolding, give them credit for those early levels as well. And then feedback. Most all of the studies on feedback show that is key to learners making progress. And again, giving tangible evidence. Sometimes it's hard when you're in the class for weeks and months and years, and you don't really have a sense of your own progress. Maybe as a teacher you see it, but as the learner they're not really seeing it. So you have to find different ways to articulate that they are making progress. This is what we've tried to do with our score reports that come out of those assessments that I was talking about, the ongoing monitoring of progress, showing areas of strength and areas for improvement, with tips on how to improve, and then links back to courseware. So this again is the connected English learning program, where you can use a combination of the courseware and the assessments, building in some of these things that I've been talking about: reflection, progress monitoring on a kind of regular basis, and then building up to certification. And so that was my project, the Global Scale of English. Fast tracking your learners' progress. Let's not get excited and think that fast track means that this is a miracle approach to learning languages. That's not what that means. What that means is that you can be sure that this is based on the most effective way to learn languages. So you're not going to be making false starts. You're not going to having to, people are not going to be dropping off. This is based on all of that research, the most effective and efficient way to learn a language. It's going to take time. You know that, you're teachers, you've spent years learning the language, I'm sure. But if we are able to develop the growth mindset, the confidence in our learners, then they will become more resilient, they will be motivated, they will be more engaged, and success breeds success, and you will have better performance from your learners. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you for your time, your attention. I don't know if there were any questions. I don't think I'm going to be able to scroll through the chat, but just to say that after this webinar, you'll be sent an email. You'll be asked for your quick survey on how you found the webinar. And then if you complete the survey, you'll be sent your certificate of attendance. So please take it. It's very quick, very short survey. Please complete the survey, give us feedback. We're always trying to improve, and receive your certificate of attendance.